What's the creepiest fact you know of? Story 1. The bobbit worm is a predatory worm that lives in corals. They can grow up to 10 feet long, and their jaws can chew through coral. They come from eggs, which can be dormant in corals you buy for fish tanks and such. They are next to invincible, and on top of strong jaws that can slice a femur in half, they are covered in venomous spines. So literally, out of nowhere, these things can appear in your saltwater fish tank, and it's virtually impossible to kill them. And they will chew tunnels through all of your coral and slice your fish in half. Not to mention they're polychaetes, so if you somehow manage to slice the head off of it or something, it will just grow a new head, and the head will grow a new body, and they'll mate and make more worms. The fact those things exist is creepy enough for me. Story 2. Crevasses are V-shaped, so if you fall in, it most likely won't kill you. You will get stuck, and your body heat will slowly start melting the ice, causing you to slip further down the crevasse, until you will no longer be able to expand your chest in order to breathe. Touching the Void is based on a true story of a guy that survived falling into a crevasse. It's an excellent film and very much worth watching if you're looking for something good on Netflix. Story 3. There are more bacteria and assorted non-human cells inside your body than there are cells carrying your DNA. When you die, they don't die, just the opposite. After they lower you into the ground, for months, your body can look forward to being more alive than ever. Story 4. Before a caterpillar becomes a butterfly, it liquefies in its cocoon using juices that are similar to what it uses to digest its food while it's a caterpillar. So to put it another way, a caterpillar digests its body from the inside out until it's just a pile of caterpillars thrown up in its cocoon. Then it transforms into one of the most beautiful insects in the world. Story 5. The Challenger space shuttle crew compartment did not explode when the rocket carrying it did. It traveled on and upwards for a while, with at least some of the crew possibly, I think probably, and NASA found that too distasteful and horrifying to release, but that's my opinion, alive until it finally fell into the water far out in the ocean at around 200 miles per hour, decimating everyone inside instantly, if they weren't already dead. Story 6. When you buy a deadbolt set at a hardware store, there are only so many different lock configurations, usually 4 to 5 for cheaper sets. I found this out when shopping for a 4-pack, which I couldn't find, and then asking an associate. He pointed out that I just had to find 2 2-packs with the same code on the front. When I asked, "So you're saying that 1 to 5 people who buy these will have keys to my house?" He said, "Well, yeah, but they would have to try every door with those locks." All I could think about was the fact someone could buy these lock sets and find any door with those locks and just try the key from each code until one worked. Still creeped about it. Or they could just go to any house and bump key it, which is ridiculously easy and fast. Even today, most locks are vulnerable to this hack, especially in apartment buildings, where the owner chose your lock and really doesn't give a damn if it's vulnerable to lockpicking or not. Story 7. Botflies. The larvae burrow into live mammals until they're ready for their next life stage. The species of botfly that attacks humans lives for 8 to 12 weeks, during which you can feel and see the larva moving under your skin and eating your flesh, occasionally sticking a little tube out from the wound in order to breathe. Story 8. There are 100 trillion microorganisms in your gut. That's 10 times more than the number of cells in your entire body. You are essentially a big bag of mostly water that exists for the cultivation of microorganisms, a giant petri dish with attitude. We're a big bag of mostly water that exists in a mutually beneficial symbiotic relationship with trillions of smaller water bugs. You make it sound like they're parasites and we're just jackasses carrying them around. A lot of them couldn't survive without us, and we couldn't survive without them. Story 9. Ted Kaczynski, mathematics professor turned antisocial manifesto writing survivalist/serial killer Unabomber, was probably subjected to psychologically damaging experimentation in the CIA project MKUltra as a student, which may have contributed to his maiming and ending of dozens of people, stating in one case that a victim's business was the development of techniques for manipulating people's attitudes, the very goal of MKUltra. I hate conspiracy theories, but on this one, signs point to yes. Story 10. People who experience disturbing hallucinations may be driven to self-enucleation as a last resort to rid themselves of their nightmarish visions. Unfortunately, because these hallucinations are created by the mind, eye gouging does not remedy them. Think about what it must be like to live in a nightmare for most of your life. Think about your worst fears and never being able to close your eyes. Every waking and slumbering moment being invaded by horrors and never being able to look away, being driven to the point where you try to remove your own eyes just to feel a moment of relief. Story 11. If you are caught in an avalanche and become buried, assuming you don't hit a tree, rock, etc., and unable to move, the heat from your breath will slowly melt the snow surrounding your face. This creates a bubble around your face, which, after some time, will reach a point where the melted snow turns into ice. Hence, you end up suffocating because this ice bubble is not as permeable as the snow. Story 12. In a 2007 survey, 2,681 patients were surveyed, and 98 reported being awake during previous surgeries when they should have been unaware and asleep. That means there's a 3.6% chance that you will feel the surgeon cutting you and you cannot stop him. To put the fear of this to rest, patients are hooked up to heart rate monitors, and if there is an extreme spike in your heart rate, they will stop the procedure and figure out why. If the risk is that you are still conscious, they will just supply more anesthetic until your heart rate is steady and you are asleep. Story 13. Simathoa exigua. This parasite enters fish through the gills, and then attaches itself at the base of the fish's tongue. The female attaches to the tongue, and the male attaches on the gill arches beneath and behind the female. Simathoa exigua extracts blood through the claws on its front, causing the tongue to atrophy from lack of blood. The parasite then replaces the fish's tongue by attaching its own body to the muscles of the tongue stub. The fish is able to use the parasite just like a normal tongue. It appears that the parasite does not cause any other damage to the host fish. Story 14. I hate wasps, but the emerald cockroach wasp is actually tight as crap. It injects a poison into a specific section of the brain of a beetle that effectively makes it into an obedient slave. The wasp leads the beetle to its nest by its antenna, where the wasp lays eggs in the beetle. The beetle then waits sweetly and patiently while the wasp's offspring grow up and eat the insides of the beetle. Story 15. The fact that in the very far future all matter may collapse into black holes. There will be absolutely nothing left. Everything will be destroyed, and there is nothing we can do about it. Of course, this is billions of years in the future, and we will probably be extinct by that time anyway. But the fact that there may come a time in the future where nothing exists anymore is so creepy. I mean, what is the point then? Story 16. 1. That all of the memories you had as a child are not your own memories. If you are an adult, almost all of the cells in your body are different now than they were then. You are not the same person as the person that had those memories years ago. 2. Although it feels like you have free will in life, you don't. You are on autopilot. The decisions you make are a result of your genes, environment, and chemical reactions in your brain that you have no control over. These chemical reactions and resulting electrical signals formulate what you think and what you do. Once I came to grips with the fact that humans are not exempt from the laws of physics and causality that everything else in the universe is subject to, it blew my mind. I no longer regret anything because I realize I couldn't have done anything different. I lost all hate for other people because they have no control over who they are. It's not their fault. Maybe not the creepiest fact, but certainly the most mind-blowing. Story 17. You can have nasty, nasty MRSA staph bacteria on your skin at any time. You probably do right now, at least a little, picked up from a variety of surfaces. More likely if you've been in a prison or hospital or butcher shop, but really not uncommon. A small break in the skin, a paper cut or hangnail or minor scrape, will cause that staph to infect you with just horrible results. This could be you at any time, just because your cheek itches and your fingernails were a little too ragged and scratchy. Story 18. There is a spore which takes over the mind of ants unfortunate enough to get it. The ant then, under mind control of the spore, climbs to the top of a tree where a new spore begins to grow out of its head, and the whole process repeats. Story 19. There are over 2,000 species of microorganisms that live on and in the average human body. The number of cells of these organisms is greater than the number of human cells in your body, and the only reason you don't look like a walking column of gray-green goo is because human cells are larger. Story 20. The end of each strand of DNA has an ending section called a telomere that, among other things, stabilizes the DNA. As you age, due to the anti-parallel nature of DNA, the lagging strand must be synthesized in chunks and is thus lagging behind the other leading strand. I'm getting to my point. As you age, the end of these telomeres shrink. You could, if you wanted to, measure the amount of shrinkage and determine when you are likely to die due to old age. Story 21. Several times, someone has themselves near Halloween and haven't been noticed until they start to smell, because everyone thought they were a decoration. It was customary in the 1800s and earlier to cut off people's heads after death for fear that they might turn into a vampire. People have found coffins from the Middle Ages with barred doors to prevent the people from escaping and from being buried alive. A common form of execution then. Rodney Alcala, a serial killer from the 70s, appeared on the dating game and won. Story 22. Of all funding given through the UN or UN-sponsored NGOs, 90% goes to bribing people who are creating the conflict so that the other 10% can be given to the people who are suffering from the conflict. That means for every $1 spent on helping people heal from conflict, $9 are spent on sustaining that conflict. Story 23. There's a plant that grows in Australia called the Gympie gympie. Touching the plant will result in unbearable pain because of the small needles on the plant. The pain is so unbearable, people and animals kill themselves because of it. There's also a plant called hogweed that can cause severe burns and blisters that can scar you for life. Story 24. The fact that rabbits eat their babies when they know they won't survive. Almost all animals do. In a sense, it's humane. Cats will just leave their sick babies to the wild to starve, rot, or get picked apart by bugs. I'd take the mom doing the deed over hours of ants any day. Story 25. If you have FFI, fatal familial insomnia, you will experience progressively worsening sleeplessness. Your inability to sleep eventually turns into total insomnia, at which point you'll die. People who have this rare genetic condition will all perish. It's inevitable. Most people within a year of its onset. Scary to think about. Story 26. Rose West is, alongside her husband Fred, one of the most infamous serial killers in modern British history who eliminated several lodgers in her house. And if not for a single mistake, she would have gotten away with it. When they were finally caught, all evidence actually pointed to Fred being the sole culprit, and she shifted the blame onto him, either out of a sense of loyalty or despair for being betrayed. Fred offed himself in custody, which seemed to end the idea of bringing him and his wife to trial, relegating any other investigations into figuring out what offenses Fred had committed. The police were still deeply convinced that either Rose knew more about the murders than she was letting on, or that she was a direct participant. But she was a tough egg to crack. The police tried every angle conceivable, but she always deflected the blame onto Fred, and there was never a crack in her story. Too well rehearsed. She knew what to say, when to say it, and they couldn't trip her up. However, while investigating both her husband and her own backgrounds, they discovered that Fred had a daughter from his first wife, and the police confirmed that not only was this girl one of Rose's casualties, Fred has an ironclad alibi for when she passed because he was in prison. And when they confirmed that another casualty found was the girl's mother, the police had a clear motive. Rose killed her stepdaughter and told people she was back to living with her mother, and had Fred kill his first wife to keep her quiet. Story 27. That you really do need 7 to 9 hours of sleep every day. Even at 6 hours, the lack of sleep decreases efficiency, productivity, and increases risk of developing dementia and Alzheimer's. Furthermore, it weakens the immune system and handicaps the body's ability to destroy cancer cells, which therefore increases risk of cancers of the breast, colon, ovaries, and prostate. The scary part of it is that you can't get back all the sleep that you lose out on because sleep efficiency decreases. So trying to catch up on the weekends isn't really making up for what you lost throughout the week. Ironically, those who say I can sleep when I'm dead will end up dead quicker because of lack of sleep over time. Story 28. Geologist here. The Earth's magnetic poles, places your compass point to, are moving at an alarming rate. While they switch, think north compass arrow will point south every 10,000 years or so. We are overdue for a switch. So happy 2021, y'all. Also, the supervolcano under Yellowstone does technically have the firepower to wipe out much of life on planet Earth, but it's not overdue like many people try to claim it is. That's just fear-mongering. Also, there was a point in the past during the Ice Age, I think, where less than 2,000 humans were alive. If it would have been modern humans, we would have to put ourselves on the endangered species list. Story 29. Surfer's myelopathy is a non-traumatic injury most often seen in novice surfers, where they tweak their back while trying to get up on the board. They initially feel pain and weakness, and then they become fully paraplegic. It doesn't even have to be surfing, yoga, Pilates, or even getting up from laying down. You just hyperextend your back a little weird one day, and bam, you're in a wheelchair, completely paralyzed from the waist down. Story 30. Everyone appears virtually normal. Weird people are weird, but the scariest thing is, if someone truly is warped mentally, they will appear absolutely normal. Always wonder if someone I know is truly someone I know, or just a projection they're showing me so I can't see the real him or her. Story 31. Every time you log into a website, post on Reddit, send a text message, make a call, even just turning on your phone, your name and information is logged in anywhere from 10 to 30 different servers worldwide. And it's not just your phone or computer. New cars have data tracking systems that log your information that can be pulled during service. And yes, you agreed to all of it just by owning a piece of equipment. Story 32. You could have experienced incredible and unimaginable pain and anguish or similar horrible things at any time and for any period of time, but you've forgotten. Because you've forgotten, it's as if it never happened. But at a point in time, a version of you was experiencing unbelievable pain. It's scary to think you could have forgotten many things that nobody knows happened. But when they did, you yourself did experience them. The worst part of this is that even if you don't remember it mentally, your body does physically. So you have reactions and responses that make no sense to you because you don't remember the thing you forgot. The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk explains more about PTSD and how the body holds on to those traumas. Story 33. If you really were granted immortality, I don't mean like a vampire that can be killed in a certain way. I mean true immortality, like you will never cease to exist. Even after all the stars have burned out and the universe contracts and there is another Big Bang, you will still be conscious and aware. And as many times as this cycle repeats itself, this will never change. Your existence will never end, ever, for any reason. That thought is truly horrifying. That really depends on how you view consciousness, though. There are plenty of ways to get vaporized down to atoms. So unless there's some hitherto undiscovered route that all consciousness is tied to atomic structure, you'd have a way out eventually. Just wait for the sun to go supernova, and it's good night. On topic, I think immortality with an off switch would be good. Take as much time as you want to live, and when you're done, Just find somewhere to switch off comfortably. Story 34. A thing called estate recovery exists. Say you've worked your whole life, you have a solid 401k, nice house, etc. Then you get sick, like we all will. You lose your job and the insurance that comes with it. So the medical debt collectors take your life savings until you're below the 2K threshold needed to qualify for Medicaid, which happens insanely fast because every tiny thing seems to cost at least 10K. Once you die, everything left that you had spent your life working towards goes to the state. Not your kids. You lost most of it to debt collectors. But now your children pay the ultimate price. They lose the home they grew up in, and everything else that you owned. It wasn't enough for them to deal with the loss of a parent. The system is rigged to keep poor people poor. If you want your kids to have a good chance at life, you better start giving to them now. And just hope that you don't get sick within 4 years, because that'll count as a transfer of assets, and they'll take it back. I worked in healthcare, and I have seen this happen in nursing homes and assisted living facilities more times than I wanted. It's part of why I quit the business. This is why I plan on keeping a decent cash savings that isn't recorded anywhere except in my head.